Yes, welcome to the Good Fight. We are live right here on Facebook every Tuesday night from 7 to 8 p.m. And we are so glad that you have joined us for this time together. Whenever you have joined us, whether you are live right here in this space, whether it'll be tomorrow or Saturday or Sunday, during whatever the normal rhythm is in your life, we are just grateful for your presence in this space. And so I just want to say Sawubona. That is the Zulu tribal greeting, which means we see you, we respect you, we honor you, the whole of who you are, understanding that you don't show up as just one person in our midst, but you bring the whole of your heritage. You bring all of your ancestry with you. So it would actually work better if we said we see y'all. And so you are representing all of what has happened to you and through you, and in relationship to you as you show up in this space. And we welcome all of that. So thank you for being here. If this is your first time joining us for the Good Fight, welcome, welcome, welcome. There are three or four ways that you can engage with the Good Fight tonight, and as we move forward, one of the ways that you can engage is to find yourself in the story. Locate yourself in the story, like which character are you, and then decide. And you might change characters throughout the story. Like it's all about you engaging with the text and seeing if you are representing the same kind of ideology, the same kind of theology, the same kind of sociology around as the characters that we are reading about. And then once you locate yourself, that gives you an opportunity to interrogate yourself, to examine yourself, to ask yourself questions, to say, is this who I want to be? Is there a different way for me to be? Am I proud of who I am? Like all of those questions you can ask and answer for yourself. Tab, I was looking for you this morning. Glad to see you tonight. Another way that you can join us, that you can engage with the Good Fight, is to look through a window. So there are some experiences that we just will not have as living witnesses. It's something that we will not experience in our own bodies, but somebody else will have the experience. And so we want to center their story, give them an opportunity to share with us the gift of story. Because for someone to tell you, to share their story with you, that means that they feel comfortable enough. That means that they are passionate enough to, because they're speaking for a cause. That means that they trust you. That means that they feel safer in this space. And all of that is to be held with holy hands. And so we center the other person's story so that we can receive it. And that's it. Like, I'm not listening to see if you're trying to teach me something. I'm not listening to see if there's something I want to challenge. I'm not listening so that I'm listening so that I can wait for my turn to tell my story. No, but it's just an open mind to receive the story, allow it to penetrate your spirit, and then allow the spirit to bear whatever fruit it's going to bear from your knowledge of that story. So you just sit back and wait and watch. Who knows how long it takes? It might not ever produce any fruit. Again, who knows? A third way that you can engage with the Good Fight is to walk through a door. And so it is really my hope. It is my hope that this conversation lingers beyond this 1 hour time that we have together, that you will be thinking about it tomorrow or the next day, or in a month from now, somebody will say something and you'll say, wait a minute, and then it'll pop up. I believe in the ping pong theory. So I learned this when I was in seminary. I did not have enough money to pay for seminary on my own. I did not have the support of my father that would allow him to pay for me to go to seminary. So I was, I quit my job and I was on a hope and a wing and a hope and a wish and a prayer, whatever the phrase is. And so I ended up getting a job as like this house mom for two developmentally delayed adults that first year. And then after that, I became a hall director, and I was the hall director of Smith Hall on the campus of Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, while I was attending Perkins School of Theology. And when I was there as a hall director, I would have to have these like one-on-ones with my supervisor. And Kelly was her name. I wonder where Kelly is now. Kelly was her name. And she taught me this. She said that, especially with the age of the people that I was dealing with. So these are college age students. They're freshmen. They're young. And she taught me about the ping pong theory. And it's reminiscent of back in the day. I guess it was like the lottery back in the day where it would happen on the news. I think there would be this big clear case, and it had all of these balls that were rolling around in the case. And then all of a sudden there was like this swoop sound, and then one of the balls would be lifted up, and then the person, of course, this white blonde thin woman, would pick it up, and then she would show us the number, and then you would try to see if you won. Like I call it the lottery. I don't really remember what it was, but that's the idea that it is our job, it is our responsibility to impart as much wisdom and knowledge and understanding that we can into the lives of those in our midst. In my case, these were the college students, but in our case, it could be our family, our friends, our employees, our colleagues, who knows, whoever it is. It's our job to make sure we say it. Now, we don't have any control over what people do with the information, but the hope is that it's going to be in there, that it's going to be rolling around in there. And at the point that you need it most, then it will pop up for you, and you will be able to use it to produce something good, regardless of what good looks like. It's something in my mouth now. Regardless of what that good looks like. Because sometimes I think we call things good without an understanding of what is good. Sometimes I think we call things bad, and we don't really know what bad is. So the ping pong theory says we're going to say it. That's what I hope that walking through the door is, that I'm going to say something, and you're going to receive it, and it's going to be in your mind. It's going to be in your brain. And then at the moment that you need it, it'll pop up for you and you can use it. And then finally, you can comment like low. You can comment right here. You all can have conversations with each other. We can all have conversations together. The only thing I can't post to you. I don't know why they can't figure that out. I can't post to you. If I post right now, it's going to go to the YouTube channel. It's not going to show up right here. So, okay. All of those are the preliminaries that we do every single week to make sure that you know how you can engage the space. And, I should add that you don't have to do any of those things. Another way that you can engage is not to do any of those things, right? Like, you ain't got to do nothing. Or should I say you ain't got to do nothing but stay black and die? I'm still thinking about Dr. What was his name? Augustus? There is a young black doctor who wrote a book that's called Stay Black and Die. I was trying to find it so I can remember his name, but I don't see it in this world of books that I have. So welcome. Here we are for the Good Fight on Tuesday, July 9th, 2024. So we were talking last week about David. I was trying to get to a place. The title last week was We Glorify Not God. And I think I just did a little bit of a variation of that for tonight, because we did not get to that spot. We spent a lot of time talking about David and Bathsheba, and we were going through the story, and that was all part of the foundation that I was trying to lay for tonight for that subject matter. So since we didn't get there last week, I want to get there, or try to get there tonight. And it doesn't matter to me if we don't get there. Like, I don't have an agenda. I don't want to say I don't have an agenda. I have a plan, but when I get into the space, I release it. So whatever happens, happens. And I'm just going to get in on the flow. Y'all's flow, our flow, my flow. We're going to get in on the flow. So David, the story is about David and Bathsheba. David as king, who sees this beautiful woman of color that is bathing on her roof, minding her own business, and he is captivated by her presence. This is something about her that he wants to know who she is. And not only does he want to know who she is, but he wants to be intimate with her. He wants to have sex with her, and he ends up raping her because he does not have her consent. He's the king. She cannot say no. That's just the nature of things where they were. And so he rapes her, and everything would have been, I was going to say everything would have been fine. His plan would have worked had she not gotten pregnant. But because she got pregnant, now he's got to figure out what to do, because Bathsheba is married. She's married to Uriah the Hittite. It's not possible for her to tell her husband that she's pregnant because her husband is off at war. So if she told her husband that she was pregnant, he'd be like, how is that possible when I've been off to war? One of the things that was very, one of the one of the ways in which they lived during that time when they were at war, and I would assume it's the same way now. Yeah, I would assume it's the same way, that you are so focused on the task at hand, you are so focused on the war, that you are away from your spouse, that you're not thinking of, like, you don't have time for sex. The sex is just not on the agenda. Sex is just not something that you're doing because you're so preoccupied with the fact that you might die tonight, you might die tomorrow. I was going to say fox, like you're in the foxhole. Your fellow soldier might, like you. It's just a lot going on that you're not thinking about sex. Now, don't think that I am confused. I know that there are several people in the military who have affairs, who engage in extramarital affairs, because they are off to war. I have this one friend whose husband had an affair while he was away at war, and the wife justified it. She said that she totally understood how he could be under such duress, like wondering if this was his last night and needing to feel comforted during that space, in that head space where he is scared and worried and afraid, and somebody else is going through that same thing. So she felt like she understood how he could then turn to someone for that moment, for that time. Not an emotional affair, not something that he was going to leave his wife for, but just in that moment, this is what I need, and I'm able to satisfy that need. This person is willing and I am willing, so that's what we do. So I'm not delusional. I know that people have affairs when they are away at war. My point is that because you are at war, the last thing that's really on your mind is to have sex. You might be thinking about your spouse, and that might get you through the tough times, but really you're focused. Like, you got to stay alive. You got to you have to accomplish the mission. Like, you have to tunnel vision. So Uriah is at war. So if Bathsheba comes up pregnant, then he's going to know that there's something, there's a dead cat on the line. That's what I heard somebody say. Junior says it all the time. And so David is trying to figure out, what am I going to do? How am I going to find my way out of this? And so what he does is he sends for Uriah to come home so that he would have sex with his wife. Because David is thinking, you've been away at war all of this time and you've had to practice celibacy while you're at war. So when you have an opportunity to be able to see your wife again, to be able to touch her and smell her and be close to her and to experience the power of her presence, then naturally you're going to want to have sex. And so he's hoping that Uriah will go home, have sex, and then his Bathsheba's going to come up pregnant, and everybody will be none the wiser. But Uriah is an upstanding soldier, and he says, no, I can't do this. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going home. I'm going to be with my fellow soldiers outside of the gate, because I can't imagine myself celebrating in this moment when they are fighting for their lives. And so David tries again. Like, he tries again to get Uriah to go home, and Uriah still doesn't go home. And so this time, the third time, he calls the commander. He sends the message to the commander. And he sends the message to the commander by Uriah. So Uriah is delivering the letter to the commander-in-chief of the army that has the instructions on how to kill him. And so David instructs the commander-in-chief to put Uriah on the front lines so that he can be killed in war, and that will solve his problem. And so that is exactly what happens. Joab is his name. So Joab is the commander-in-chief, puts Uriah on the front lines. Uriah dies, and the messenger comes back to tell David, and the messenger is expecting David to be like, wait a minute, what? Why you put him on the front line? Blah, 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 blah. But David is, and so Joab was like, tell him that Uriah died, because Joab knows that David is going to be like, oh, okay, mission accomplished. And so that is what happens. And so when David kills Uriah, he murders him. What do you call that? Conspiracy to commit murder. He murders him. Then that leaves him free to have Bathsheba become a part of his life. He can now legally, whatever legally looks like there, it is okay for him to then invite Bathsheba into his home. And so then if she gets pregnant now, people will say it is David's, and it's no big deal because Uriah is dead. Bathsheba has honored the mourning period before even entertaining thoughts about any other man. And so everything will be kosher. So that's where we are. So I want to pick up the story right there at the very last the very last verses of what would have been 2 Samuel chapter 11. I want to say 2 Samuel chapter 11. Yeah, chapter 11 verses. These will be verses 26 through 27. So when Uriah's wife, who is Bathsheba, heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. I want to read that again. When Uriah's wife, we're talking about Bathsheba, heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. So David is what has David done, right? So he has raped this woman. He has conspired to commit murder of her husband. He has taken her into her home. He's made her his wife, and now he has had this son by her. So these are the acts of David. And so what we're talking about tonight is about we glorify, but God doesn't. That last line where it says, but God was displeased with him. Like, what does that mean for God to be displeased with him? So I want to go back and mention that it's in 1 Samuel. I want to go here. 1 Samuel chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. 1 Samuel chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. It says, after this, God gave our people judges until the time of Samuel the prophet. Then the people asked for a king. God gave them Saul, the son of Kish. Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. He was king for 40 years. After God took Saul away, God made David their king. This is what God said about David. David, the son of Jesse, is the kind of person who does what pleases me. He will do everything I want him to do. That last verse, verse 22. This is 1 Samuel chapter 13, and this is 1 Samuel chapter 13, and this is verse 22. After God took Saul away, God made David their king. This is what God said about David. David, the son of Jesse, is the kind of person who does what pleases me. He will do everything I want him to do. That's the easy to read version. I should have used the New International Version because it would have said that David is a man after God's own heart. And lots of people who profess to be Christian, when they talk about King David, that is one of the first things that they will tell you about King David, is that he was a man after God's own heart. Even when you bring up the story of Bathsheba, people will continue to say, but David was a man after God's own heart, as if to say that no matter what his behavior is, we can excuse it because God said something positive about him. So if God is pleased with you, it really doesn't matter what else happens because you're going to get a pass because God is pleased with you. So this happens in 1 Samuel chapter 13. Is that right? I feel like that's not right. I want to just double check that. So, but it doesn't matter for the purposes of this conversation that we say that David is a man after God's own heart. I'm still looking this up to make sure that I'm telling y'all the right thing. Because I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. We're talking about Samuel. This is first, so chapter 13. Yeah, so what did I say? 1 Samuel 13. 13 through 14. Oh no, I need 20. Yeah, see, I don't think that's right. I really want to say that must be in the book of Acts. No, but it's in the Old Testament too. But that's not what 1 Samuel 13 says. 2 Samuel 13. It's a 2 Samuel 13. I really think that this is Acts. I really think that what I've written is Acts. I said it's 1 Samuel, but I really think it's Acts. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. So this is actually Acts chapter 13, verse 22. That's what this is. I said 1 Samuel 13 through 14. That is not true. Yeah. This is Acts chapter 13, verse 21 and 22. And 22 is our focal point. After God took Saul away, God made David their king. This is what God said about David. David, the son of Jesse, is the kind of person who does what pleases me. He will do everything I want him to do. And this is where we get that phrase that David is a man after God's own heart. Yes. So when we have this conversation about David, um, kind of like ticking off all of the things that David did that made God displeased with him, we have a tendency to still glorify David in the midst of all that he has done that caused God's displeasure. We don't want to focus on that. We only want to focus on what God said that was good, and then we want to negate everything else. So even though we know a person is flawed, well, all of us are flawed, right? So we don't want to pretend like we're not. All of us miss the mark. We don't want to pretend like we don't. All of us have something that we need to be working on. We need to be striving towards perfection. Perfection does not mean to be perfect. I love Hotep. He's always pushing us to think about the etymology of the word. Perfect means to be complete. So we're striving every day to be whole humans that are in relationship, in right relationship. I got that from Marcus. Right relationship with other humans that we hope are journeying towards their wholeness as well. And so David is flawed just because he's human. We are all flawed because we are human, but he has taken some measured steps to violate the code of humanity. For you to kill somebody, for you to conspire to kill somebody, for you to rape somebody, for you to pretend like it's no big deal, for you to try to sweep everything under the rug. Like, these are measured steps that David has taken so that he can get away with his crime. And even though we know that about him, because the text is clear in telling us the story of all of the things that David has done, we still, when we lift up the name King David, the one thing that we want to say is not that he's a rapist, not that he's a murderer, not that he's a conniver. What we want to say is, oh, but he's a man after God's own heart. And I want to say that this is probably where we source this theology where you can do whatever you want to do, and as long as you confess your sins before you die, then you'll go to heaven. So I can kill people all my life. Like, I can kill any number of people. I can I can do all manner of evil to anybody that I want to for as long as I want to, as long as on my deathbed, if I have the opportunity on my deathbed, I say, I believe in Jesus Christ and I want him to be my savior, then that statement erases everything that I've done that harmed people, and it allows me to walk into heaven. And so this kind of idea that we can forget, we can just push aside all of the wrong, all of the evil, and still glorify somebody. I think that says something about us. I think that says something about our theology. And I think that says something about the way that we are living in this world right now. What we are faced with in the midst of, especially this particular presidential election, when we have a person who is a convicted felon, and we say, oh, but some people are actually saying, oh, but he's a man called by God. Like, so it doesn't matter anything that he said. It doesn't matter anything that he's done. I believe that God's hand is on him. So therefore, let's forget about that. Let's push that to the side, and let's just focus on the fact that God is pleased with him, because according, like David, he's a man after God's own heart. Like, God likes him. God has shown favor to him. Here's a comment. Hotep, you always shooting. You be throwing them jabs, and they be landing. We don't want to say that David is bisexual, right? And you said LOL. He says LOL, but really, Hotep is not joking, right? So the story of David and Jonathan, that's also in the Bible, which is very clear in the text when David says, when he's talking about Jonathan, Jonathan and Saul. Saul was Jonathan's father. David became an enemy of Saul, and that caused a rift in his relationship with Jonathan. So David had to run away to try to save his life because Saul was trying to kill him, like literally trying to kill him, shooting arrows at him in this like this small little space. And so David runs away. Jonathan and his dad end up getting killed at the same time as while they are at war. And when David learns about Jonathan's death, he says these words. He says, I loved him more than that, more with the love that more than a woman. I don't, this is not verbatim, but basically he says, I loved him more than I loved any woman. That's what he says. And so when you think about that, when you think about those words, like if he were talking about a woman, if he says, I've loved, if David had said something to the effect of, I love you with a love greater than any other woman I've ever been with. You are the absolute love of my life. You are the apple of my eye. My whole life has been about finding this kind of love. Like if he had said that about a woman, then everybody would have been like, oh my goodness, aren't those beautiful words? Like I wish somebody would say that about me. Like I want to find that kind of love. Like we would be standing in awe of that kind of love. But he says it about a man. And so because he says it about a man, you can't just gloss over the fact that he says it about a man. It's the same sentiment. It is the same emotion. It is the same amount of passion. And so he's like, oh, he was in love with him. Yeah, he was. And so this comment about David being bisexual is valid. Like you can find it in the story if you choose to receive it. And so it goes back. This is actually falling right in line to what we're saying right now. Like we decide what we want to remember about a person. We decide what we want to lift up about a person. We are willing to forgive whatever we want about a person if it furthers our own agenda. And so people want King David to be the greatest king of all. And in order to do that, you got to make sure that you don't tell his whole story. You got to keep his skeletons in the closet. And so we have a tendency to do that. We want to uplift a person. If we think that this person is going to get us from A to B in our agenda, in our life, for the goals that we have set for ourselves, then we are willing to excuse whatever it is. We are willing to, I think about that with the Republican Party. Like when you think about, let's just talk about Nikki Haley. So Nikki Haley actually was running against Donald Trump, right? She was campaigning for president of the United States. And so she was campaigning against Donald Trump to become that nominee from the Republican Party. And so she's got all of these things that she's saying about Donald Trump, like all of these, like she's coming at him full force. Like, I mean, she was not holding back. Like she was telling you exactly how she felt, how she's experienced him, what it's been like, being under his leadership and with his former administration. Like she's coming strong, right? And then she drops out of the race because she realizes she's not going to get it. Like the writing is on the wall. This is not for you. And then she endorses Trump. So she now glorifies him, even though a few minutes ago, a few news cycles ago, you had all of these bad things to say about him. You wanted to expose him for who he really is, but now because he's going to further your Republican agenda, you're on his side. And so this notion that we can ignore the whole of who we are and only cherry pick the parts of a person that we want in order to get what we want, we have to caution ourselves against that, especially when we do it in the name of God. And so when we think about all of the identities that we hold, that people, this world has given us, like race, gender, class, socioeconomic status, educational level, military status, like all of these things that people, like, they pile on to us. And then you say, well, okay, I'm looking for, I'm on a board and I'm looking for somebody that's Black and somebody that's woman so we can check off this box. I don't want to know your story. I don't want to know your experience. I don't really care what happened to you, what school you went to. I don't care anything about that. I just need to check this box. So let me pull out the parts of you that I want to use. And then I'm gonna ride that coattail to wherever I'm trying to go. So Deidre says people will always prefer Barabbas. People will always prefer Barabbas. And so Jesus is crucified with two real thieves. Like 3 people get crucified when Jesus is crucified. Now, let me just say something about that. Again, we glorify, God does not. That's the title of tonight's, that's the subject of tonight's talk. So when you see three crosses, the next time you see three crosses, if you have never paid attention to this, I want you to pay attention to them. So there are three crosses because three people were crucified. The two other people were crucified the same time that Jesus was crucified, one on each of his sides. And so when you see the three crosses, if you notice, the one in the middle is always bigger. It's always bigger than the two on the side because the one in the middle is who we consider to be Jesus, because the Bible says there's one on each side, so he must be in the middle. And so, but we've enlarged Jesus's cross because we want to glorify Jesus in a way that we do not glorify these other two. But all three of them were lynched for different reasons, yes, but all three of them were lynched. And Jesus himself did not call himself God. The people called himself God. And so you got these three people who were lynched, Jesus being one of them, Barabbas being another one, the other one being oh no, Barabbas was not crucified. Barabbas, when it was time for Jesus for them to decide who was going to be crucified, they had a choice: either crucify Barabbas, who was the one who had done all these bad things. He was a thief, whatever he was, and then Jesus, who was innocent. Who do you want? Who do you want? They let the people decide. Oh my goodness, this was an instance of direct democracy where the people could decide what was going to happen, what was going to be the fate of these two men. And even though Barabbas had a history in the community of being someone who does wrong, and Jesus had a history in the community of being someone who was upstanding, they still chose to crucify Jesus and to let Barabbas go. And so that's what Jesus talked about. People prefer Barabbas, but let's ask ourselves that, right? Like, why do you prefer? Like, was it even about Barabbas? Like, I don't even think it was about Barabbas. It didn't even matter. It could have been Denise. They wanted Jesus. They were coming for Jesus because Jesus was disrupting their system, right? Jesus was trying to turn what is who is that? Ain't I a woman? Harriet Tubman. I've borne 13 children and none. But she talks about Jesus being a one person that could turn this world upside down, that could put it right back on its kilter, like try to change it. So they didn't. I don't think it would have mattered who it was. It just so happened to be Barabbas. And this goes back again to us choosing to glorify people regardless of their story, because it's going to further our agenda. Oh, Sojourner Truth. Yeah, I don't know why I said Harriet Tubman. Okay, so it just says, be careful, Denise. I'm not saying that Biden is innocent. No, none of us are innocent, right? Like, none of us are innocent. But just like we're talking about with Jesus and we're talking about with Barabbas, like, the people have to make this direct democracy. We have to make a choice. In November, we have to make a choice. Who are you going to choose? It is your voice that is going to make the difference. It is your vote that is going to make a difference. Both of these people, in this case, we're talking about Biden and you're talking about Trump. Both of them have histories that we can call on and say, wait a minute, Joe Biden, I remember that you wrote this crime bill from this 1993 crime bill. Like, you wrote that. So, well, you co-authored it. He wasn't the only writer, but you wrote that. And that has, it just caused mass incarceration to explode. And so, yeah, that's a strike against you, Joe Biden. I still remember that. Absolutely. So, no, Joe Biden is not innocent. And then with the war, like, yeah, of course. But you got to make a choice between two people. And who are you going to choose? And why are you going to choose? And that's what we have to think about. Why are you choosing this person? And we have to be careful that we're not choosing a person just because we want them to do our bidding, because we have an agenda that does not include the whole of the world. It only includes my party, my people, my agenda. We cannot get caught up in that. And that's what happens in the story of David. So that we don't want to talk about him as rapist. We don't want to talk about him as murderer. We only want to talk about him as a man after God's own heart. But then what does that say, though? She's correcting me. I said Harriet Tubman. This is Sojourner Truth. Ain't I a woman? I've borne 13 children and none but Jesus served me. And ain't I a woman? So, but what does that say about God, though? If God truly said it, now don't get me twisted. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. The very first semester of seminary, I had a professor, his name was James Ward, but they called him Jim because people could name James and get a nickname Jim. I don't know why. He said, like, on the first day, I remember it because it was traumatic for me. That's why I remember the very first day he said, God is a character in the hands of the writers. God is a character in the hands of the writers. That was the first sentence. The second sentence was, so the writers can make God do and say whatever they want. So I am clear that we are putting these words in God's mouth, that God said these things about David. But let's just go with it. Like, if this is God speaking, God says that David is a man after my own heart. And David is a rapist and a murderer and a conspirator. I think that's the word, right? He's up to all kinds of stuff. Then what does that say about God? Like, do we even really want to conflate God and David? Do we really want to make that statement that this is the kind of heart that God has, a heart that will freely and willingly do whatever it takes to get what you want? Like, even if it means harming your neighbor. Like, is that a man after God's heart? Like, why would we even say that? Why would we even say that? And so part of the whole discussion that we keep having is about how we need to dig deeper when we're talking about these scriptures, when we're talking about our faith, when we are proselytizing, trying to get somebody to come in to convert to our faith. We got to be careful how we characterize God and how we tell God's story, because our interpretation could very well be harmful the way this particular characterization of God is absolutely harmful. And so I want to get to show you this glorification, to show you this displeasure that God has with David, and to continue to ask the question, if God says no to the person, like, I'm displeased with you, why would we turn around and say, oh, but I'll take you? Because let me tell you something about Denise. Even though I will never have a dog, you ain't never got to worry about me having a dog. Never, never. I do respect them, though. I absolutely respect them. I respect them so much so that if a dog will not come to you, I don't fool with you. If a baby will not come to you, I don't fool with you. So if God says I'm displeased with you, I ain't gonna fool with you. Right? That's it. I don't need to know anything else. Now, yes, I can be cordial with you. We can have conversation and all of that. But in terms of, like, becoming friends and spending time at each other's house, you eating off my spoons and forks, no, that's not gonna happen. Because if God said, wait, watch out, I'm absolutely going to listen to that. So that's why energy is so important, because when people walk into the room, Deidre's daddy was just talking about this today. People walk into the room, you can perceive, like, you have a sense of who they are by the energy that they bring into the space, and you get to decide how to navigate that energy. You can walk out and you can say no to that energy. Tamara, what did she used to say? People lie, but energy don't. That's what she used to say all the time. Okay, so I want to take a look at this story now. So we looked at David and Bathsheba, and we saw how the story unfolded. And let me just take a moment, though, here at the end. Let me go back to the very last verses of that story. Let's go back here where it says, when Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. We're getting ready to focus on that displeased the Lord part. But first, I don't want to gloss over this verse 27. After the time of mourning was over. In ancient times, when this was written, this practice that they had was that it was very important that you took the time to grieve. It was a very public thing. Everybody knew that you were grieving. It was such an important part of their practice that they actually had professional mourners. There were actually women whose job it was to make sure that they walked through the city wailing and crying so that people would have permission to grieve whatever the loss was. It could be the loss of a brother, the loss of a child, whatever the loss is. You have to take time and there's a certain amount of time, like there's a certain number of days that you spend grieving, because even in ancient times, they knew that it was important for our brain health for us to grieve whatever loss. It was important for our brain health that we sit with our emotions, not especially, but all of our emotions, those of sadness and sorrow, and we have to sit with them. And so fast forward to today, where we act like we have stigmatized mental health. So when a person has anxiety or depression or bipolar or schizophrenia, we we consider them outcasts. Like we don't want to be near them. We don't, and so much so that people don't want to take their medication because they don't want people to find out that they're taking medication, which makes them dangerous, not just to the world, but to themselves. And so I want to just lift that up and just highlight that, to underscore that during the biblical times, they understood the importance of centering yourself and taking time to engage your emotions. Because I can't remember who said this, that I was looking at the talk, whatever talk it was. No. She was preaching at our church. I can't say her name. I can't pronounce her name. But she preached at our church, and she said our emotions, it's data. They give us information that we need to engage. So when we are sad, we need to ask ourselves, okay, sadness, what is it that you are saying to me? What are you teaching me? What am I going to learn from this sadness? Like, guide me through this process. And so I just wanted to take a moment to just lift that up, that it was very important for everybody, the whole public, to give Bathsheba time to mourn. I said that during my father's eulogy too, about my mother, because people like wanted to call and talk, and I was like, look, leave her alone, right? Give her some time, let her mourn, and let that be okay. Instead of what we do when people are sad, we're like, oh no, everything is gonna be okay. We just want to gloss over and be, oh no, the Lord give it, the Lord take it away, blessed be the name of the Lord. Like, we come up with all these little cliches that actually shame people for mourning. But in the Bible, it says, no, we need to take the time to center our emotions and to sit with them, whatever they are, before moving on, so that we can make sure we are tending our own brain health. So to this displeasure of God, let's listen to this story. I've got this story, I've broken up into 3 parts because I'm trying to do a better job of how the words show up on the screen. So let's listen to what happens after David has Uriah killed on the field, on the front lines. Then after Bathsheba has had time to mourn, David takes her into his home. She becomes his wife, and she has his child. After that, this is what happens. The Lord sent Nathan to David. Nathan went to him and said, there were 2 men in a city. One man was rich, but the other man was poor. The rich man had lots of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little female lamb that he bought. The poor man fed the lamb, and the lamb grew up with this poor man and his children. She ate from the poor man's food and drank from his cup. The lamb slept on the poor man's chest. The lamb was like a daughter to the poor man. Then a traveler stopped to visit the rich man. The rich man wanted to give food to the traveler, but he did not want to take any of his own sheep or cattle to feed the traveler. No, the rich man took the lamb from the poor man and cooked it for his visitor. David became very angry with the rich man. He said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who did this should die. He must pay 4 times the price of the lamb because he did this terrible thing and because he had no mercy. That is 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 1 through 6. I love the Bible. I love the stories, right? There's so many stories, like even the ones that make you say, now, what'd you do that for? Like, listen to this story. Like, Nathan comes to David, like, listen to what happened. This rich man had an overabundance of things. So we talk about the 4% in our country. You have an overabundance of things. And then when it's time for us to talk about taxes, you want a tax cut. And the tax cut is going to hit those of us who have nothing, not nearly as much as you do. It's going to hit us harder. You don't want to give up anything that you have, but you want to take the little that we have. Like, this is like we're living into, I love it when the Bible does this. When the Bible lifts up off of the page and just dances before our eyes, and then it has to settle in our hearts and in our minds and in our souls so that we can figure out what to do with it. So this is the same thing that we see with people who have wealth. I'm making 6 figures. You're making 6 figures as a CEO, but you're condoning policies that won't allow people to have won't allow people to make a living wage. Now, how you at the top and you got 6 figures, but the people on the bottom are working for $7.25 an hour? Like, how is that possible? So Nathan comes to David with a story of our world today, that the people who have are so greedy that you can't, and you're never satisfied. You want more, even if it costs somebody else their last. So the poor man only had one lamb that he loved so much that he allowed the lamb to sleep on his shoulder. And on his chest. And I thought that was so tender, because it reminds me of my dad. So when I was a baby, my dad let me sleep in the middle of his back, and he refused. He would not turn over, like, no matter what. He might have, I don't know, surely he got uncomfortable. Surely he went numb sometimes, but he stayed in that one spot all while I was asleep. When I woke up and wanted a bottle, he could move, but he never moved. I was his baby. I was his only girl, and he let me sleep right there on his back. So I could just imagine this lamb sleeping on his chest. And a lot of times, this is what I've heard. I don't have biological children, but a lot of babies want to be up against your chest, like listening to their heartbeat. That's just like the best little place to be. So that's where this lamb is. Like, that's how precious this lamb is to this man. And the rich man wants to prove. Now, he has the traveler who comes, because hospitality was a big thing. That's really what the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is about. It's about hospitality, them being inhospitable. It's not about being gay or homosexual. It's not about that at all. It's about being inhospitable. And so there's a traveler. And so the rich man wants to look good in front of the traveler, because he wants to say, yes, 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 come into my home. Let me feed you. Let me be hospitable to you. Let me just, let me take you in for the night, because that was the custom of the time. But he wants to do that. He wants to look good, but he don't want to expend any of his own money. He don't want to expend his own energy and efforts. He wants to take a shortcut. And when he takes the shortcut, it's going to be at somebody else's expense. So he's the one who looks good. The traveler's like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I really appreciate your generosity, not knowing that he just killed somebody else's lamb to feed you so that he could look good. We do it right now all the time. It's happening in front of us. And so David is livid when he hears this story. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this rich man did that. He ought to pay for it. I mean, he just loses it. He's so mad about this, what happens in this story, that he goes slap off. That's what happens. And then let's pick the story up with verses 7 through 10. Then Nathan said to David, you are that rich man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I chose you to be the king of Israel. I saved you from Saul. I let you take his family and his wives, and I made you king of Israel and Judah. As if that had not been enough, I would have given you more and more. So why did you ignore my command? Why did you do what I say is wrong? You let the Ammonites kill Uriah the Hittite, and you took his wife. It is as if you yourself killed Uriah in war. So your family, your family will never have peace. When you took Uriah's wife, you showed that you did not respect me. David's so mad. He's so mad about this man. Oh my goodness, this rich man. Let me point at you. Let me talk about you. Let me condemn you. Let me send you to hell with all you doing. And Nathan is like, no, slow down. Slow your roll, bro. I'm talking about you. You did this. And God rolls the tape. God rolls the tape and says, you did this. You took his wife. You raped her. That's what you did. You took her. You had her husband killed. Basically, the blood is on your hands. So let me tell you. So here's a consequence for your actions. There will never be peace in your home. So here God is saying, now this is the same God, according to the way we interpret the Bible, this is the same God that said David was a man after his own heart. So if David is a man after his own heart, then God is pleased with him. And I'm not saying that God was not pleased with David at some point. But I know right now, God is not pleased with David, and he makes no bones about it. Look at what you have done. And so here are the consequences. I'm going to hold you accountable, because when I tell you to do something and you say that you are my servant, I expect you to do it. This is the relationship that they have. Ain't my relationship with God, but this is David's relationship with God. God gives the command and David says how. God says jump, David says how high. And so now God says, when you disobeyed me and you're going to do your own thing and you think you're going to you might get away with it with people, but you're not going to get away with it with me. And so God is demanding that David be held accountable for his actions. And if we say that we show up as God, because if we say that remember, we were talking about this, I don't remember when we were talking about it, but we said Jesus, if the definition of Jesus, if what makes Jesus God is that he is God's spirit in the flesh, then we can also argue that we are God's spirit in the flesh, and therefore we show up as God, just like Jesus did. And so if that is the case, then we have to make sure that we are holding people accountable to the rule of humanity. You can't go around here raping people and killing folks and doing whatever you want to do and not be held accountable. And somebody needs to tell this to the Supreme Court. You can't just be creating ways to not hold people accountable. God said, yo, God, these white people, God, these white evangelists, God, yo, God says that you have to hold people accountable for their actions. So, David, you need to know from this day forward, there will be no peace in your home. None whatsoever. So that was 7 through 10. Let's finish it out right here with 11 through 14. This is what the Lord says. I am bringing trouble against you. This trouble will come from your own family. I will take your wives from you and give them to someone who is very close to you. He will have sexual relations with your wives and everyone will know it. You had sexual relations with Bathsheba in secret, but I will punish you so that all the people of Israel can see it. Then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan said to David, the Lord will forgive you even for this sin. You will not die. But you did things that made the Lord's enemies lose their respect for him. So your new baby son will die. Yes, ma'am. So here we are with David coming to terms with himself. Nathan has to bring him the word from God, which simply means that we as community, and I'm not talking about community of faith, I'm talking about we as the human community, we have to have somebody within our community that will help us see ourselves for ourselves. We got to have somebody who's not our yes man, somebody who's not so busy trying to get in our pockets to benefit from how much money we have, or they're not trying to smooze with us because they want to be a part of our network because we know we can introduce them to people and take them places. We have to have people who are willing to say, let me show you yourself. I need to turn a mirror. So I need to reflect back to you how you are showing up in community, how community experiences you, how you are harming community. I got to show you. And we have to have that kind of relationship with each other so that when community shows up and shows you who you are, you don't say, that ain't me. You humble yourself. And you realize that you got some work to do. Restorative justice has now knocked on your door and you must answer. How are you going to restore? How are you going to repair the harm that you have caused? Somebody's got to call you out. We can't keep living in this world where somebody's scared. I was talking to somebody at an event and something went down and she didn't want to call it out because she said, well, I was trying to be professional. I said, since when does professional mean not holding people accountable? Since when is that the definition of professionalism? I'm professional by calling it out. That's what I told her. That's how you know I'm a professional, because I'm gonna keep the main thing, and my feelings are not caught up in this. So Nathan shows up as community to say you are harming the community and you are casting an ugly look. You making my God look bad. Which means that so many of us need to be saying this to these evangelical Christians, right? You are harming the community and you're making God look bad. You're making people lose respect for God by your shenanigans, by how you acting. And I'm coming to you because I'm not scared of you. And I'm unapologetic. Nathan is standing 10 toes down. Nathan is standing on business. He ain't scared. You are the one, David. You are the rich man. Look at what you have done. And now hear what your consequences will be. You'll never have peace in your home. I'm going to take your wives and they going to have sex with folks. And everybody going to know. Everybody going to know your business. It's just like around here. Some of y'all know these whose husbands sleep with all these other folks. We know. We know. It's public. God said, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. That's going to be your that's part of your consequences. And God said, I'm going to kill that baby. I ain't say that. God said this. You say God didn't kill the baby. Well, y'all blame everything else on God, don't you? God allowed it. So God did it. So if God is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient, knows all, is everywhere, and has all power, then how come you can't blame it? God said, "Kill this baby." Because you disobeyed me and you made me look bad. After I elevated you by saying you a man after a God's own heart. That's if you believe that all the words in the Bible are inspired by God and God put these words in the writer's hand so they can put them in the mouth of God. If that's what you believe, then this is what God has done. And so some of you all are like, well, wait. Don't say that about God. Okay, well, that means you got to rethink your theology. You got to rethink your Bible. And that's what I'm asking us to do. When you really stop to think about it, is this really how God acts? Does God really say, I'm mad at you, so I'm going to kill your baby? Personally, I don't want to serve a God that says that. I'm mad at you, so I'm going to kill your baby. What? Because I made a mistake? Because I gave into my human desires? Because there's evil that lives in me? And I could not tame myself, so I took her because I wanted her. And so now you mad, and so you're going to kill my baby? Some of y'all are like, well, that must be karma. Karma is different from people saying the Lord did it. And maybe that's why they call that particular thing karma, because they don't want to say God did it. But there are consequences for David's actions. And David does not realize the harm that he has caused until community shows up and reflects for him what he has done. David says, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan says, your sins are forgiven. You're not going to die because of this. You're not going to die because of this. Your sins are forgiven. Your sin is forgiven. But still, you're not going to get away with this. You're going to have to suffer some consequences. And so I wonder tonight, as we get ready to leave, I wonder tonight, who's in your circle? Do you have a person in your circle who can tell you about yourself? Do you have a person in your circle that you are willing to hear everything that they have to say and take it to heart? Decide whether or not it's consider it. You might reject it. You might reject it at the end because community can be wrong sometimes. But will you at least, because is there a person that can come to you and show you and you can receive it and then mourn, grieve over yourself, grieve over your own behavior, grieve over your own evilness, grieve over your own trauma that you are perpetrating on somebody else? Can you find somebody in your circle that can do that? If not, you got to find somebody. You cannot navigate this life not seeing yourself for who you are. You need to know how people are experiencing you. And that is the mark of a human that's striving towards perfection, that's striving to be whole. I want to be able to know how people are experiencing me. And if they are experiencing me in a way that causes them trauma, then I need to say, whoa, let me take a step back. Let me reevaluate. Let me rethink myself. Let me start getting a plan together so that I can make a change, because I don't want to be like this. I was talking to a friend the other day. I used to say to people, I sweat on my nose year round. And when I was little, people said that I was told that if you sweat on your nose, it means you're mean. So I'm like, okay, I must be mean because that's what they said. And I sweat on my nose year round. So I was telling somebody, like, I kind of introduced myself, like, what you need to know about me is I'm mean and hateful. Like, I know myself. I know I got a big heart. I love, I give, I do all of those things. And I am mean and hateful. You need to know that. So the person I told this to said, I don't believe that about you. When I look at you, when I see you in spaces, when I hear you talk and I listen to your voice, I just don't believe that. I said, so you telling me you know me better than me? I just can't believe it. That's what he said at first. So now that he has gotten to know me better, he said, you know what, Denise? I remember the day that you told me you were mean and hateful. And I remember the day I pushed back on you. But now I just want to say this. Not only are you mean and hateful, but you vicious too. I said, what? Like I was okay with the mean and hateful. I'm like, I know I'm mean and hateful. I told you that. But when he added vicious, I said, really? And he said, oh, I thought you knew that part too. I'm like, no, I didn't know that part. He said, Denise, yes, you are vicious. And ever since he said that, I've been like, oh my, let me consider this. Let me examine myself. I don't want to be vicious. I don't want to be vicious because the way I read my mean and hatefulness is that I'm going to come for this system. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to stand up for right. I'm going to fight for justice. Like, oh, yes, I'm going to throw it down. Like, yeah, I don't care who I have to put in check. I don't care how they take me. I'm going to make sure that I'm speaking truth. Like, that's how I was taking my mean and hatefulness. But when he said I'm vicious, I'm like, oh, no, that's a step too far. And so now that means I got to do some work. First of all, I need to find out if other people feel the same way. Because I'm like, is this just you being biased against me or what? But yes, we have got to be able to have people in the community that can show us who we are, show us how people experience ourselves so that we can be held accountable for our actions. We have to be willing to hold other people accountable for theirs, no matter what level they're on. Supreme Court, president, city director, school teacher, neighbor, it does not matter. We must be willing to show up as God and say, look, you cannot act like this anymore. We will not stand for it. And here are some consequences that you must face. What would our world look like if we did that right about now? Right about now. I don't know. Y'all hit me up and let me know. I'm interested in what you have to say. Thank you so much for joining us for the good fight. I will see you next Tuesday right here, same time, same place, 7 o'clock CST on Facebook, streaming through StreamYard. Bye. Let me go see about my mama.